Brisa, welcome back to the Brand Retro podcast. Thank you for coming back for a second recording.
Yeah, hey Mike, no problem.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, that not that it matters, but we recorded this about, a week and a half or so ago, and for whatever reason, we only got one side of the track, so Brisa was nice enough to come back and have the discussion again, so maybe it'll be even
practice.
Yeah, right? It'll even be more efficient this time, so.
Yeah.
So start off and tell me a little bit about CivicBrand, what you guys do and how you approach things. And then just FYI, I think we talked about this last time too, but I'm pretty passionate about small towns. I'm from a small town, so I love what you guys are doing. And that's kind of the gist behind why I want to learn more about CivicBrand.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so at CivicBrand, we work with cities, districts, so like downtowns, shopping districts, things like that, counties, city departments on branding and placemaking projects. So helping them kind of define what is the story that they need to tell, what is this place about, and also more into the built environment and like how do you physically tell that story when you're there? So both like online and kind of in commercials and things like that, but also like when you actually get to a place, does it feel like a place? Does it feel like a different place? What is the thread that needs to run through everything?
Right. And you're helping them from a tactical side. And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to as well. But part of what you guys do, which I want to explore a little bit, is the deeper meaning and kind of passion behind it, is that you help these towns, these small towns, not only cultivate their uniqueness, the things about them that make them attractive, but you help them craft their story and you help them essentially build their identity, right?
Yes, we're helping them hone in on figure out what their story is, but I think even more important to what we do is we're building civic pride. Like we're able to, by engaging with people and by asking them what do you like about this place, why are you here, I think it's giving people more pride in where they live and making them more excited about what's to come and what they can do for their community, which is has much greater far reaching impact than even just the branding project.
Yeah, I think you're giving a lot of substance to the word community, so that
right,
with the visual pieces, with the obviously the tactical, the marketing pieces, you're helping that, essentially that community come back to life. And a lot of times, that's kind of the curse and the blessing of small towns, is they're small, people sometimes don't leave. But I also think it's very hard for small towns to sustain excitement and pride and community and all these different things because they're not growing and doing the things that they once did. So I think for them to latch on to something they can be proud of or something that they can continue to celebrate is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes me think of, so I work in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, which is, if you've watched Making a Murderer, it's up by Manitowoc. But that was kind of the thing with that community, is like, it was a factory town in its heyday, and that factory was super successful. And then the factory shut down.
Yeah.
And the town kind of lost its identity. It lost that sense of pride. Like everyone was proud because here we make this thing. We have this like globally known factory. When it was gone, people kind of like lost what does make us special? Like they were hanging their hat on that. And so a big part of that project was just helping them like kind of rediscover that, like, yes, that factory is gone, but that entrepreneurial spirit that like of the people that started that factory, it still exists. It's just in a different way today.
Yeah. So let's do a before, during, and after.
Okay.
The before, what does the client look like before they get to you guys? Are they looking for a solution? Are they kind of bought into something they saw another town do? What does that look like? And then we'll kind of transition into, what does that process look like once they're, in the during phase, they're in the working, creating phase. And then what's the follow-up look like? What does the after look like? What is it? How do they sustain that and take what you've given them and hopefully, help it grow legs so that it can continue to, to march into the future?
Sure. Yeah. So before, it kind of varies. Some communities, because this what we do is kind of like growing in popularity. More communities are recognizing like the need for a distinct brand and the story behind it, all of that. So some communities like are very much, they're actively seeking out consultants like us, and it's an RFP process, and like they already know we want to build a brand, we just need someone to help us do that. Whereas other communities, it is more like we worked with a community here in Texas that was like, we need some more parking signs, we need to tell people where to park.
Yeah, they have a specific need.
Right. And then with our expertise, we're able to like hear that and be like, okay, yes, I understand what you're trying to say, but actually let's take a step back, and like what you really need is a bigger picture thing. You don't just need a parking sign, right? Generally, you know, once we talk to them, then they see it, they get the value of like the bigger picture approach. During, you know, it's a lot about our whole like philosophy is about community engagement and just talking to as many different types of people as we possibly can in that community, whether they've been there a day, been there, you know, their whole lives, doesn't matter what they look like, what they do, etc.
I want to flush this out. Last time we talked, and I thought this was super interesting, is that your engagement, your process can take upwards of a year, right? And you, as part of that process, you, your team, whoever's involved in the project, you guys visit, you guys get in the community, you experience it for yourselves, and then from that you build the plan, the strategy, the uniqueness. That, talk a little bit about that, because I think that's important in this process, because I'm sure you run into this where you get these potential towns or these spokespersons for the towns that say, you know, have you ever been here? What do you know about our town? How are you going to help us if you've never been here?
Totally. Yeah. Well, yeah, we do hear that. And that's why it's so important that we like become fully immersed in the place. Because it's really important that it doesn't feel like something that we just flew in from Texas and like, here, handed you this brand and we're telling you what to do. That it feels more like we listened to you, we gathered all the inputs, and like, this is what came out of it. You guys built this, we just helped shape it. Right. Yep. And so, yeah, we do, projects are a year and a half long, and we visit the community several times, and we do all of the, you know, like famous popular things that a visitor might do, or, you know, so we're going kayaking, we've been up in float planes, like all of those cool things, but we're also just doing the normal, like everyday stuff of like, where do we go get our coffee? Where do you guys go shop for groceries? And just talking to people on the street, like going about their normal days. So that way it is, we're getting the real experience and not just like the red carpet rolled out for us. Right. And so even a lot of times, like what we'll ask on our first trip somewhere is we'll say like, we're going to get there and you give us that first day to like, we're just going to go wherever we think we need to go, see whatever it looks like we need to see. Like, we're not going to meet you guys. You're not going to like take us on a tour. We're just going to naturally explore the area. And that helps us, like, if we feel like we should turn somewhere, we'll turn somewhere. If we're trying to find something and it's like hard to get to, like, we know all of those things instead of having that red carpet rolled out and we just see the good stuff.
Yeah, it's a very authentic way to approach it. And like you said, it's don't give us the shortcut. Don't give us directions. Let us figure it out on our own.
Right.
And that way we can come to the table with the experience.
Right. Exactly.
So what does it look like? Who do you work with? I mean, I'm sure there's, you know, economic development type people at some of these towns. Do you work with the board? Do you work with, like, typically who do you work with within these environments, and how many people are involved from the community side?
Sure. Yeah. Again, it varies, right? So sometimes we're working directly with the city and like the city communications department or the economic development department. But then sometimes we're working with the chamber. Sometimes we're working with the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Sometimes we're working directly with City Council. Like, it all kind of varies depending on the size of the community, depending on what the project, the ask actually is. So sometimes it's city, sometimes it's more like public-private.
And I asked the question because, like, within every town, every situation is going to be different as to who's making those decisions.
Oh, sure.
You've already kind of alluded to it, like whether it's like a communications department, whether or not it's the Parks and Rec department, whatever it is. if I'm one of those people, how do I know that I'm that person to take this to the next level? Or how do I find, if I'm a town in need, how do I know what I need, and how do I know if I fit? Like, how do I know that this is something that would, lift up our community? I think as a overall concept, I think every town should do this, but obviously that's not the reality. So how
Sure.
do you know when you're ready as a small town? How do you kind of know when to take those first steps, and what are they?
Maybe this is going to sound like kind of fluffy, but I think when you're ready, when you feel like there's that next level that you're trying to reach, and for whatever reason you don't feel like you can get there, right? Like maybe there's like a sense of energy, and you're just like ready for that next thing, and ready to accomplish more as a community, or attract more residents or visitors, whatever it might be. I think that's probably more of like a feeling.
You guys come in, you spend the 12 to 18 months, we go through everything, we build, a better presentation, a better brand for ourselves. We've decided what our goals are, what our tactics are. We've got things in motion. What does that look like next? Do you help me sustain that? Do you help me drive that for a certain amount of time? Do you leave me with some recommendations, or what does that
Sure.
look like? So that,
Yeah,
because the pitfall is that you don't want it to drop off. You don't want all this
absolutely.
work to be in vain, right?
Right. Yeah. We always say we don't want it to just sit on the shelf at the end.
Right.
Like that would be a failure. To do all this work so hard for nothing to ever happen with it.
Right.
And so the big like deliverable at the end of all of our branding projects is an implementation plan. And so generally that's like over the next 3 to 5 years, what is everything you could possibly do to implement this brand, and what are the really key important things that you like absolutely need to do? What are the things you can worry about 3 4 years from now, helping prioritize. And then also with that we outline like, okay, this is something just you as city staff can do, like you don't need any outside help. This is something that you should hire a consultant to do, because obviously everything after that becomes like another project, right? Just in the way cities work and budgets and all those things. So here's something you could hire us to do. You could hire a third party consultant, like whatever it might be, just kind of outlining, oh, here's something you need help from the community to do. Just helping them kind of prioritize and see what kind of resources is it going to take. And the thing that I always like to stress is like, because it can feel, okay, we've just worked for a year on this big project. We're finally got to the end. Here's the brand, right? And it's natural to like, okay, we just spent all this time on this. Like, let's overnight. It should change, right? Like that's the only way it's going to be successful, but that's not the reality of it. And so just being conscious that like you're going to go through this process, but then there's going to be another process of actually implementing, all the work that we've just done, and knowing that it's okay that not everything is going to change overnight, and things are going to change along the way, and budgets and priorities are going to shift. But like, as long as you're kind of sticking true to at least the story that has been developed, that we've uncovered, I think that's the most important thing. Not
Yeah.
not all the signs or polos or whatever it might be are going to change day one, so you're not going to see it everywhere. But as long as like the mentality shift, I think, is more important.
And I assume you kind of walk them through that, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
in all marketing, really, it's a marathon, not a sprint in most
Right.
cases, and it takes time, and there's evolution that happens too. I mean, even though you get it as right as you can get it on day one, you learn a lot over time. So
For sure.
give it that 12 to 18-month window to just sink in, and you evolve it as you go, and you tweak and you dial it in after the fact. But
Right.
it's patience and trust that it's going to work. I mean, you go through all that work and the research and the discovery and the building and the tactical side of getting all these ducks in a row, and it's not a light switch. So you have to have faith and trust in what you just did,
Right.
and let it do its thing. And even if that takes a year, or two, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, but having that patience is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And because a lot of times we're working with smaller communities that maybe don't have as many local businesses as they would like, or as many visitors as they would like to get, whatever it might be. Like, just because now you have this brand doesn't mean that overnight businesses are going to pop up and overnight people are going to come. The brand is about like creating that framework to attract the people that want to open the businesses, to attract the people that want to visit there. And so it's a process.
Tell me about a current project. I know you guys are doing one, and I don't know if it's titled Branding Lubbock or what it is, but we had talked about that last time as well, in that Texas, right? I think Texas is awesome, and it's a great state. And we had talked a little bit about it, and I kind of want to rehash it, is talk to me about the Branding Lubbock project and just kind of where you're at with it, what's all going into it. I'll reiterate again, I would have thought Lubbock would have been a big enough city or probably established enough to kind of have that roadmap, but apparently not. They're working with you guys. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So yes, Branding Lubbock is kind of what we're publicly calling the project. So that's like the project website. We're doing a project podcast under the same name. We are, I would say, nearing halfway through. So we're like getting close to our research phase being done and like engagement phase kind of wrapping up within the next couple months. But yeah, I think that's maybe because of its size. I mean, it's almost like 300,000 people. So it's a pretty big city. But I think that to a lot of people, they have a vision of Lubbock in their head that is, Lubbock 20 years ago and not the Lubbock now, Lubbock 50 years ago, even, where it was a smaller, town in West Texas in the middle of nowhere, 6 hours from like another major city. And people just kind of have their preconceived notions about, West Texas and what that is. And so a big part, a big theme that we're uncovering is like, Lubbock is not what you think it is. It's grown up now. It's different, right? Because it is a big city. Yes, there's that kind of like West Texas mentality. And of course, agriculture, farming is a big part of like what made Lubbock so successful and such a big city now. But like there's with Texas Tech and some of the other like higher education institutions there's like really, really solid. I mean, there's a medical school, law school, really, really solid like medical services. There's a downtown that is like in the midst of being revitalized. And so that like part of culture is really coming up. There's a big arts scene there. Music is a really, really big part of its history. So I think that like, yes, we have this kind of West Texas, like, friendliness that you would associate with like a small West Texas town, but like we're the grown up version of that.
Right. And you're going to be able to just kind of extract and tap into all those cool things that are going on. And you didn't mention it, but I'm assuming the food is outstanding.
Yeah,
Texas barbecue and, the Mexican food and all that stuff. I know when I lived there, it was like, it's one of the big things I remember from living in Texas, but
of course. Yeah. Barbecue, of course, because it's Texas. So of course. But yeah, there's a lot of other types of cuisine there that I think would be surprising to people, and just a lot of like even just like elevated Texas barbecue, things that just is proof that like there's a lot going on there.
brandinglubbock.com is the website, and you said you had a podcast as well. What's the name of the podcast, just in case anybody wants to follow along with this project?
Sure. Yeah, it's the Branding Lubbock podcast. You can find it on the project website, but also on like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the normal stuff. But with that specifically, we're using it as a way, not necessarily to like update people on the process. There's a little bit about that, but really it's to dive into specific topics and like think about Lubbock through the lens of, so we've done a food one, just all about food in Lubbock. We just launched one about weather because that's kind of a big like misunderstood thing, I guess, about Lubbock. People assume windy, not great. So we talked to a local weatherman. We talked to a guy because vineyards are really popular there, right? It's a really big wine growing region, which again, I think is kind of surprising to people. So we talk about why the climate is actually perfect for that in West Texas, in similar to like the Napa and, the more famous wine growing regions.
Right.
So we're just examining, like really diving in deeper to a specific topic and how that relates to Lubbock.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me about not only rehashing CivicBrand and kind of what you do in your processes, but revisiting branding Lubbock with me as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stay connected by following us on social media. There you'll find a steady flow of information on CyberDogs, our customers, and the work that we do. Check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/CyberDogsMarketing, on Instagram at instagram.com/CyberDogsMarketing, or on Twitter at twitter.com/CyberDogsLTD.